Hello everyone, welcome to Agile Leaders episode 14. This is an exciting moment for our community because we have Dean Leffingwell, who is the creator of the SAFE framework, Scaled Agile framework. This is a really exciting moment for all of us. If you have any questions which you would like to ask to Dean, you can use Agile Leaders hashtag on Twitter. We will direct your questions to him and he will answer them. Welcome, Dean. It's a pleasure to have you at our show.
Thanks for having me in Turkey, as close as I can get at this point.
Yeah, great. So, could you please tell us about your background? What are you doing right now?
Let's see, background of what I'm doing right now. Those are two different things. My background was, my schooling was in the system space. I have degrees in aeronautical engineering and biomedical engineering. I immediately started a company in biomedical engineering developing computer-based medical equipment, and I did that for about 20 years. So out of school, I was a CEO involved in the development of medical equipment, most all of which was, life-saving and life-threatening. So because of that, I started off with a really high level of concern about software and software quality and software methods and practices that produce software quality. So I think of myself as kind of an armchair methodologist. I'm always working on the methods that create the greatest software, and that's been the theme throughout my career. Thereafter, I started another business to create requirements management tooling. That was Requisite Pro. I ran that business for 4 years. We sold that to Rational. I was a VP of Rational for 4 years. I took on responsibility for commercializing the RUP, which at the time was Objectory. And I did that until about the year 2000, and I left Rational just before IBM bought them. I certainly have good friends and contacts still at IBM. But the Rational brand has now been absorbed totally inside IBM. That was 2001, and I think that really begins the second portion of my journey, which was I had the opportunity then to be completely free of any notions of predecessor waterfall or iterative type development and RUP, and got to experiment with a number of smaller businesses, 6 of which I was involved in some kind of co-founding capacity. And I was the VP of Dev/Product Manager for most of those 6. And at that time, one of the companies was Rally Software. They introduced me to extreme programming, and also I took Ken Schwaber's Scrum class at Rally. I then, in my little coalition, my cottage industry of 4 or 5 companies, started practicing my own personal version of a hybrid approach. I would call it, Scrum XP with a little bit of better visualization in. I've never been a fan of the task board, so I was always interested in the storyboard to monitor progress. That was, at that point in my career, I'd been at it, 25 years or so, and I was frankly stunned by how much more fun it is and how much better software quality, how predictability was higher. If you've ever been in an XP shop, they take software quality extremely seriously. So I was, as I said, stunned, blown away by the difference, because I had actually had an experience where a bunch of folks that worked with me at Rational moved into one of my new businesses, and they struggled. They were applying RUP with, at the time, 6-week iterations seemed really fast, but they were 6-week coding iterations, literally. It was just kind of traditional RUP stuff. And we, with the support of that leader, who's the thought leader, Pete Behrens, who's a CST in the community, we implemented our Scrum XP hybrid. And I think it's fair to say within 6 or 8 weeks, we were at a whole new level of performance. So that was quite an eye-opener for me after 25 years of being in the software industry. It was a bigger change than the other changes that we went through, from structured analysis to object orientation to to iterative and incremental. And then I used that as a launching pad, because one of the people that I worked with in the smaller company went to BMC Corporation to sponsor a large-scale turnaround. And he had worked with me at this small company called Roving Planet, and he said, does that Agile stuff work in a big enterprise? And this was now 2006, a decade ago. And I said, I have no idea. As a matter of fact, when I talked to the Agilists about it and some of the leaders themselves, folks like Kent Beck, they said it's not designed to scale. It's designed for teams. It's designed for small groups where the customer's upstairs, like an XP at Chrysler. It's designed for people building small things fast. Well, that's not the hardest problem. The hardest problem is to build big things fast. So at BMC Corporation, they asked me in to apply Agile, and we started with a simple rule base. The first rule was we're going to abandon all the governance models, the SDLC, all the strictures that were associated with software governance at BMC. The second rule to replace that was we were going to measure our success. And we started what I like to think of as down and dirty, just basically 5, 6 Scrum XP teams. And we struggled mightily. We struggled mightily with multiplexing. We struggled with the fact that almost nobody in a time period could actually do what they thought they were going to do because they were interrupted so much. But we got a small degree of success working, and then we immediately had to start adding back things. The first thing we needed to add back was architectural guidance. So even 5 or 7 teams, they can form strong opinions, but if left to themselves, they will locally optimize. And if they need a module or a fixture or a web service, they'll build one. But that wouldn't be shared across the 5 teams. And they would build designs that were locally complete but didn't work well at the system level. I mean, just the UX paradigms, not to mention architectural constructs. So we added back architecture, and little by little we added back the things that we needed, including an Agile PMO, because it's a bridge too far in a large enterprise to believe that we're not going to have any effective kind of governance of large-scale investment in software development. You have to have governance. But we started by throwing it all out and then adding back the pieces that we needed. And as we did that, I recorded my thoughts in a blog, and I started blogging at the time. I recorded my thoughts in Scaling Software Agility, the book in 2007. I wish I would have written that a few years later because it was a little early. Agile Software Requirements in 2011. And then in 2011, we formed a company around the method. That company is Scaled Agile Inc., and I work for them now. And they own all the IP, all the content that I developed over that course of time. So the commercial entity right now is called Scaled Agile. We still market a publicly facing free website. There are no ads. There's no paywall. We don't even capture email address. It's simply a place where we can provide the best possible knowledge we can. I could call it a non-commercial site, but we're realistic. It's a free site. It's a free offering of all of our knowledge. But of course, we have to commercialize that if we don't get to continue to do it. So Scaled Agile Inc.'s business model is around certifying, training, and providing courseware for people like yourselves to help people successfully implement SAFe. We're fond of saying that without you, SAFe is just a website, and it does not install itself on a server or implement itself. It's basically just words and pictures. So it takes real people that really understand the intent of the model, they understand the principles and the values of the model to make it work. Having said that, it does work, and the results even at BMC Corporation, even that first time, was outstanding. We brought in QSM associates because I mentioned we said we were going to measure. That was our rule. That was the quid pro quo for saying we're going to throw out all the governance models as we'll provide feedback. We measured productivity. They actually measured productivity before and after in function points per developer per month. Now we can argue function points and developer productivity all we want, but the reality is it's dang hard to create a decent function point without creating some code. And we discovered there about it varied from 20 to 50% increase in productivity across 400 people. So if we take just that simple statistic, in that 1 year experience, we had a 25%, I'll take the lowest number, 25% increase in productivity across 400 people, which meant that equivalently, we had 500 people working at the cost of 400. So we don't talk a lot about the cost of development in Agile because headcounts are headcounts. The productivity is extraordinary, and consequently, the cost is much, much lower. So cost per unit of value delivery in Agile models is way higher. Quality typically goes up as well. Some of that is just based upon the fact that everything is tested. There's no code that isn't tested. There's no inventory. There's no untested code. There are no methods that don't have a decent unit test. There's no story that hits the market that hasn't been tested, evaluated, signed off by the product owner, and fully integrated and evaluated in the full system demo. So quality and productivity goes up, and I think you know what happens as a developer. Barack, you're a developer. When quality and productivity goes up, how do you feel about your job?
Sorry?
That's a question for Barack. He's a developer. What happens about how do you feel about your job when quality and productivity increases in your environment?
How can I say? What are your critic things to what do you think about it? What are
if you were applying a method in your career that had substantially improved productivity for you and higher quality, how would you feel about that?
I feel happy. If it's I feel happy.
Absolutely. So employee engagement goes up, and if you don't mind my asking, when you're happier, do you do better work?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Because it will improve our motivation.
Absolutely. So think about that. We have a method here, not invented by me. I had nothing to do with the invention of Agile, that increases productivity and quality. And when applied at scale, productivity and quality still goes up and employee engagement goes up. How important is that for industry today? 10, 20 million practitioners building the world's most important systems who can do a better job with safe and lean agile methods than without. So that's a really big market impact. So it keeps me from thinking about things like retirement and keeps me solely focused on what we can do to continue to evolve the model. In terms of just kind of bringing you up the current state, we released version 4 of the framework in January of this year. Of course, that was based upon version 3, which is based upon version 2, which is based upon version 1. And you can be absolutely assured there'll be a version 5. As soon as we learn more, what's the things that are not right with 4 or not extensive enough, or organizational change management or OCM or Agile HR, all these other topics that aren't in version 4, as we learn, we'll record those and that will become part of version 5. So we're on a learning journey that I've been on now for 40 years, which is how to improve the software development process. And I think that while Agile was invented for small teams and small projects, that's not the hard problem. We're building satellites, mission-critical banking systems, securities trading systems. AstraZeneca is using SAFe to dramatically improve their ability to create pharmaceuticals. Another company is using SAFe to, trying to forget the name right now, for managing the data for cancer treatment, right? It turns out that this is a really big data problem. You can really go through the statistics to understand a particular course of therapy, and they're using SAFe to do that. So those are pretty big impacts, and those result in the case studies that we put on the web. We don't write them. And as you know, in Turkey and other places, some people look at SAFe and they don't like it. We focus on our customer results and on helping our customers succeed. We'll let the chips fall where they may in the marketplace. And right now they're falling in a way that says, wow, I'm at Elbit in Tel Aviv, I'm at AstraZeneca, I'm AmerisourceBergen, Intel Corporation. These are companies that are getting really outstanding results with SAFe. So on we go to the next version.
Okay. Thank you, Dean, for this introduction. For those who are new to SAFe, can you please explain us what's SAFe by definition, and what was actually you have mentioned some of the points, but what was the motivation behind while you invented such framework?
The motivation was simple. The Agile team methods are simply better. They're more fun. Not every developer likes Agile. Not everyone likes ice cream, right? There are some people that don't like things. But 95, 98% of developers would rather be on an Agile team than not, because it's more fun, it's more productive, it's much more of a team dynamic. You're not locked in your cubicle. You're talking to people. You're engaged in a larger mission. I'm working for a team. Well, that's the goose that laid a golden egg. But that golden egg does not natively scale. If you look at Scrum or XP, there are no roles or responsibilities for anybody beside the team. If you look at the large enterprise, maybe they've got 60,000 IT workers. You know for a fact that there are roles and responsibilities way beyond the team. One quick view of that, for example, one of the first things we added back at BMC was architectural guidance, because 10 teams or 20 teams will do the right thing for them. They will locally optimize their solution. They'll use whatever resources they can to do it. They'll get better and better at their job. But that doesn't make a great system. And Deming teaches this from a systems thinking perspective. Optimizing a component does not optimize the system. So the way to optimize the system in this one lightweight way is that we've got to have an architectural strategy that says, hey, this could be a great web service, and if it was, everybody could use it. But if you're completely isolated and you have 10 teams doing emergent design working in a larger system, that the need for the web service might have surfaced, but who's going to own that? Who's going to say we're going to do that? Who's going to pick the security protocol for single sign-on? There are things, frankly, at the system level that need to be decided at the system level, and architecture is a good example. So we added back architecture, but we couldn't add it back the old way. We couldn't just say, okay, hey, architects, come on back and please tell us what to do. You have to create a pull system. You bring the architects back and say, we, the developers, are responsible for this solution. We need your help, but your architecture doesn't run. It's the code that runs. So can you please help us decide? Okay, you want to pick the security assertion markup language for secure protocols. We're good with that. What kits do you think we should use? Should we go open source? Do we want a commercial product? What type of reliability do we have to have at the back office? What happens when somebody can't sign on? Who would know? Those are architectural concerns. So the motivation behind SAFE, if you're building a really big system, it's a really big system. And you may have 4 or 5, we've got one company that launches geophysical data collection satellites. There's a satellite, the ground station, and the web service farm. Those are all horrifically large systems. You have to have architectural guidance for that. So I picked only architecture there as an example. You also have to have spend governance. You have to know that you're spending the right amount on this web farm versus the right amount on the satellite. So financial governance, architectural governance, UX governance, those things are all necessary to build large-scale systems. And Agile out of the box doesn't bring us that. So I used Agile out of the box and then brought those things that helps larger numbers of teams, and frankly, teams of teams of teams, build solutions in a lean and agile fashion.
And by the way, what are the core values of SAFE, and what SAFE promises to organizations?
So, 2 different questions. Here's the core values. First one might surprise people. It's quality, built-in quality. You cannot scale crappy code or crappy systems. So if you don't have extremely good discipline at the feature or component level, subsystem level, you can't build a big system that's worth a hoot. And it can't be fixed at the system level. It has to be fixed at the code level. So built-in quality is number 1 on the list. Number 2 is program execution. If I teach classes routinely, it's mostly what I do. And I'll have 40 people in class, and I'll ask them, how many of you are involved in really big programs? Almost all of them will raise their hand. And I'll say, keep your hand up if your program is going really well. Nobody keeps their hand up. Industry after industry, meeting after meeting, they're going, this is really hard, we're really struggling, we're late, we're over budget, our business owners don't like us, sometimes they hate us. We just put a big launch in the market, but it was defect laden, blah, blah, blah. We don't know how to build big systems effectively and reliably. So program execution. In support of that, we need alignment, right? 10 teams agreeing on what they're building will beat the heck out of 10 teams, even if those other Agile teams had more Agile prowess, if they didn't agree on what they're building. Just think of the vector math of 10 teams on exactly the same vector versus 10 teams. Let's say that those 10 teams have a 30% higher productivity, but their vector math is off 20 to 40% in any one direction. When you integrate those vectors, you end up with not a good result versus the 10 teams that are in alignment. And in support of alignment is transparency. Transparency builds trust. Trust is a key element of the manifesto, and it's a key element of Lean. Lean views trust under the lens of you can't manage a secret. You can't improve a thing you don't understand. You can't fix a thing nobody will admit to it being broken. So the combination of Agile and Lean both need trust. Trust is a personal relationship. I can't build that in the framework. Press here for some trust, right? That'd be a fun article to write, but you wouldn't get any trust out of it. What we can do is build is build systems, in our case, a hierarchical Kanban system with dedicated content authorities at the various locations at the program level and the team level that illustrate their work, they show their work, they visualize the work through Kanban, and they demonstrate the work every 2 weeks, and every 10 weeks they have a giant demonstration to show everybody everything they've been doing for the last 10. That builds trust. And when you build systems with inherent quality, when you align to a common mission and you start delivering better, trust goes up. And when trust goes up, life is more fun. It's not fun. For many in our industry, our business owners don't trust us, right? Late, unreliable estimates, don't really know. Gosh, I'm trying to run a business here, and these guys, it's like a big fat R&D shop. Well, it is a big fat R&D shop, but it can be a big fat R&D shop that can be trusted. So those are the 4 core values. What does SAFE promise? It doesn't promise anything. Our promise is that we've recorded the tip revision of the best practices that we've been able to observe in the industry. We are system integrators. We have this massive systems bias. SAFE is a system. Consequently, it's hard to pick it apart. You can't do lean agile budgeting without content authority, right? And if you have content authority, you can't proceed with traditional project-based cost accounting because it's going to slow the system down. So if somebody asks me, what's the hardest thing about SAFE? It's that you really have to do most of it. You have to do at least the team and the program layer and some of the portfolio to be effective. So it's an integrated series of patterns that we've observed. As such, it is also only a website. So what makes SAFE work is when people understand the principles that underlie it and the practices, and they work hard to do the organizational change management to get those results. So we only guarantee that we're going to record our best knowledge. We guarantee that we're going to keep that free. We're going to guarantee that there's no secrets that we have that we're not sharing. We can guarantee that there's no, pay me $30 a month and I'll tell you what we really know. That's not what we're doing. We're making it all free, revealed, and publicly available. We make our money with courseware and training, and that's our business model, and that's our commitment to the market. So SAFE will be, so long as I'm involved, free, freely revealed, publicly available, and everything we know will be in it.
Great. So as you mentioned, SAFE is only is based on some lean and agile patterns. So
yes.
I think this requires some mindset shift from legacy approaches to these lean and agile principles. So
it does.
I think that there are some patterns that SAFE promises to people. So what are these patterns?
Well, okay, so there are various patterns that are illustrated right in the big picture, right? So what you see, I've never described it well, I don't think, but what you see on the big picture is really a double harmonic of the basic scientific method of plan, do, check, and act. So if you think about an iteration, was that invented in '98? No, right? What's the basic scientific method? Create a hypothesis. Here's my hypothesis. I think these stories would be helpful, and I can do it in 2 weeks. Okay, that's the iteration hypothesis. Execute the experiment. Okay, let's run 2 weeks and finish this and see where we are. Done that. Now let's adjust. Let's do our retrospective and adjust. So let's see how we did, and then let's make another experiment. So an iteration is nothing more than a very fast plan, do, check, act cycle of the scientific method. Simple. Every team iterates. A PI is simply an aggregation of those same things, but it has a larger external envelope because we need to plan together. We don't want 10 teams to plan independently because they'll have 10 different ideas for how to build the system. They execute together. They demo their work every 2 weeks. They inspect and adapt together. So that double harmonic is a cadence-based, quintessentially lean and agile pattern. Why the double harmonic? Because large enterprises can't deal with big systems at the detail of one team's backlog or one team's feature. It's too fine a detail. There's 500 or 800 stories goes down every couple weeks. Nobody can absorb that. They need a larger quantum of time to think about the problem, to get set up for planning, and to get feedback. So the PI is simply an aggregation of 4 or 5 iterations. It also includes the innovation and planning iteration, and that's not optional in SAFE. I mean, some people skip it, but not because we say it's okay. And what the innovation and planning iteration does is help stop the tyranny of the urgent. I left the shop 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago in the UK. They were on their 50th sprint, and they were really struggling with many issues. They're a pretty agile shop. They struggled with milestones. They were struggling with burnout. What happens after sprint 52? Sprint 53? When you're building a large system, what team can afford to blow a sprint? The answer is none. So where is the innovation in that model? Where do you stop and say, I want to try something different? Well, Agile is optimized for rapid value delivery. It's not optimized, and it does optimize for innovation by virtue of fast feedback, but it doesn't give developers and testers and architects a chance to think. So the innovation and planning buffer in there, that sprint is there every 4 or 5 iterations to give people a chance to clean off their desk, download some open source, refactor some code. Hey, I've always wanted to talk to this guy about whether or not we could switch to Berkeley database, and I've never had it. I'm going to go talk to him, and for 3 days we're going to do a spike to figure out if we can run on this database. So that's a pattern, right? That's the heart of SAFe. It's what we want the teams to do. If you execute that pattern and you include inspect and adapt at the program level, here's the only guarantee I'll give you. If you execute that pattern and the teams inspect and adapt together, they'll get better. And better is good, because that's just one PI. And 10 or 20 PIs from now, better is a lot better than it was 10 PIs ago.
Okay. We know that there are 4 levels in SAFe.
Sure.
First one is team, second one is program,
Yep.
value stream, and portfolio.
Yep.
Could you please explain these levels briefly?
Yeah, so the team level simply describes good, solid team practices. So the things you find at the team level are guidance for how to plan a sprint. Now, not everybody needs that from us. On the other hand, it's good to find it someplace, and you want to do it with a consistent way. For example, we use user stories. We're incredibly enamored by them. Well, they're not part of Scrum. Well, we use them. So we want people to use user stories. So if you want to know what a user story is, how to describe it, how to articulate it, how to split it, various parameters for splitting it, how to know when it's done, how to associate acceptance criteria with, that basic guidance is there. So when we say the team level, what we really mean is we do provide guidance for Agile teams. Simple protocols. Here's a good way to run a sprint planning meeting. This is not rocket science, right? It's not something that others couldn't do. But if it isn't there, then you leave a lot to chance. Like, well, we use backlog items. Well, we use user stories. We don't. Well, we use tasks and task boards. We track tasks, not stories. Well, it's an immediate cacophony. So there's a harmonized approach to saying, hey, you can run Scrum, Kanban, use XP practices, and here's how. Still providing the envelope for the team to pick what they choose, because it's not so critical that they use Scrum or XP or Kanban. It is critical that they talk about the same problem in the same way, that their work items are user stories, that we visualize work the same way, and that we plan and integrate and demo together. So that's the team level. But that still describes what could easily be isolated teams, and the program level brings those teams together and says, if you're building a big solution, and solution is in 4.0, it's right there in the program level, at the end of the value stream, we need to cooperate and collaborate. So let's plan together. Let's have face-to-face PI planning to the extent that that's practical. Let's demo together. Let's make sure that product management as our business, as a proxy for the business, is directly involved in the program. It's not a handoff. It's not a firewall or a silo where product management, oh yeah, they report to marketing, they might come, they might not. Heck with that, they're coming. They're part of the Agile release train. Business owners, these key stakeholders who we need to get to agree and align on what we're building. Alignment isn't free. They have to agree. We bring them to the party. They're part of the Agile release train. So every 10 weeks prior to that time, I'm involved in that right now. I just left our own PI planning session for an hour to do this webinar. We're in the process right now of finalizing our commitments for the upcoming period. Do you think we're arguing some? We have some differences of opinion? Of course we do. But by the end of tomorrow, those will all be resolved, and we will be committed to a single course of action. So the program level brings that together. I'm going to skip the value stream level for a second and move to the portfolio level, because that's been present since 1.0. Well, the question comes is that if I did have effective Agile programs, how would I govern that? How would they get funded? Teams don't write their own paychecks, right? We've got to decide that we're going to pay them. And we have to decide how big an art needs to be. Do we need 30 people there, or is it a 300 person program? We need to manage the flow of work that's cross-cutting. If there's multiple Agile release trains, what happens when I want to do single sign-on, or migrate to JBoss, or move to 64-bit back-office servers? How do you do those cross-cutting initiatives? So the portfolio is designed to support and inspire Agile programs, and to provide a certain flow of work that's cross-cutting. Some of that is corporate strategic initiatives. Some of these things are like, well, I need to launch a new Agile release train. Well, that comes from the portfolio. 60 people can't, walk into a new building and say, let's build an art. You have to fund those things specifically. The value stream level is new, and the value stream level we worked on for almost 2 years, and it deals with the fact that if I have even 3 groups, 3 Agile release trains of 50 or 80 people each, and they're building a single system, there's a lot more work involved. I have to be a little more serious about understanding solution intent. I need a little more architectural runway. I need a little more specificity in terms of knowing exactly what things can be fixed and what can be variable in the process. And we're going to need to do some pre and post planning, because when the PI planning happens, we need to make sure that the right people are hearing the right message. So the value stream level is brand new. It's optional. You can collapse or expand that view, and it's for those building the world's largest systems. And SAFE is being applied right now for people building systems that take as many as 1,000 people, if you can imagine, in a single device or code line. As many as 3,000 to 5,000 people building large cyber-physical systems. So the value stream level is new and in support of that.
Great. So you mentioned some Scrum and XP-related practices. How important Scrum and extreme programming for the organizations using SAFE?
They're absolutely critically important. And as I just recently redid the SAFE Foundations briefing, because as I'm discovering, as Agile is getting scaled and adopted in larger companies, some of the basics are assumed but not actually in place. It is not an easy thing to build great working software in a time box. It's danged hard. It's the hardest thing anybody ever does. It's certainly harder than structuring a PI planning meeting. So we continue to elaborate and beef up the practices around the team basis. We've opened up, there's basically 3 basic methods there. Let's talk about them for a second and why we feel they're so valuable. Scrum, I didn't invent it. I think it's really cool. 7 to 9 people, product owner for content authority. I totally need that. How do you do decentralized decision making in a large enterprise without content authority? A Scrum Master as a management proxy to help the team really improve its own practices. And now I know what a team is: developers and testers and UX. Well, what's Scrum optimized? It's optimized for really software project management or product management, however you want to look at it. That's what it's optimized for. It doesn't talk about flow. It doesn't talk about architecture. It doesn't talk about management. It doesn't talk about guidance or governance or funding. What's extreme programming optimized for? Well, in the end, it largely boiled down to its 12 or 15, even more, I think, values. Things like courage. It's a value of XP, the courage to refactor. Refactoring, peer review, pair programming, collective ownership, coding standards, continuous integration. How would you thrive without any of that? You have to have it. So right there, I don't think it's like, oh, it's Scrum versus XP. I think that's stupid. It's Scrum plus XP. Well, how could you ignore test-driven development just because you're a Scrum shop? So I understand the commercial reasons why some of those people will occasionally, throw tomatoes at each other on stage, but I don't think there's a legitimate technical reason for that. And then there's the newer kid on the block, Kanban. What is Kanban optimized for? Visualizing the flow of work, understanding your throughput, starting to understand that given this backlog, we could be done here. Fast, tactical, response-based mandates to rapidly changing requirements. Well, is that like antithetical to Agile? No. It's a great way to understand flow. So this is the year 2016, not 2001. Isn't it high time that every single Agile team out there could run a lightweight Scrum-like process, practice the best technical disciplines known, mostly driven by XP, not all. XP didn't invent continuous integration. XP brought us user stories, which is the fundamental paradigm in SAFe. The story points is what we use. And what are those teams shouldn't understand the flow of work and visualize their work and know their bottlenecks. So I think it's just a silly discussion that it's Scrum versus Kanban versus XP. We don't see it at all. We see it as all of the above. We use all of those elements. We use a Google Doc for kind of our Kanban board. We run 2-week sprints. We run the demo in the process. It doesn't take us 4 hours to plan our sprints. It only takes typically an hour. We use Flow, and in our case, we use extensive peer review for writing articles. There's no article that goes to the site without peer review. We have standards for writing articles. We have style sheets. So we have basically content and quality control of the content. We have a lightweight project management technique, and we know actually what our yield and throughput is. That's what an Agile team should do. So let's move on with those silly discussions and get on to the next generation of saying this is all good. This is like found money. It's like a treasure chest, and there's a diamond over here and a ruby over here and a piece of gold. Well, that's all good. So let's put those all to work. And then what SAFe does is say, given that, how do we put that to work in the larger context? What if I have 1,000 people building an application that in the end just wants to get a parcel from San Francisco to Ankara? Well, it takes a lot of people to do that, and they need everything they have. So we see SAFe as a big tent and a system. Now you can't just throw all that stuff together, because you can't just say, okay, run Kanban or Scrum. Well, what about a system demo? When do we plan together? So we have a construct at the team level that brings those things together that says you can use Kanban, but it's going to be cadence-based Kanban because you have to integrate with other people. And we're going to have a little bit of planning because your team is not an island. You're not just pulling a thing off the backlog and finishing it. That thing somebody else is dependent upon, and they need to know when they're going to get it. So there's a rule base around cadence and synchronization, planning and demonstration that ties all that together. Given that, shouldn't be important to say for many managers exactly what somebody's sprint board or Kanban board looks like.
Yeah. Dean, we know that one of the important things for organization is requirement management and the prioritization of this requirement at different levels. How is SAFe approach on this point? For example, epics, capabilities, features, or something like that.
So that is a fairly deep area. I think with my background, you can understand why I focus on that. I mean, what is the key element of governance really? What are we building, and does it work, right? Okay, yeah. What are we building? It has to be defined. It doesn't have to be defined up front, by the way. I mean, you have to have a vision for that, but it's not the same as saying, oh, we need to know what we're building, so let's create a software requirement specification. Even in the high assurance world, the medical equipment industry, et cetera, you still do V&V, but you don't write the requirement specification first. You largely write it last. You say, here's what we built, and it works. So the ability to do verification and validation has to be built into that process. We used user stories at the team level because they're like the coolest invention ever in the requirements world. You know, as a user, I can do this with your system so that I can achieve this objective. We associated acceptance criteria with them, just basically following kind of the straight XP path. We basically just stole that, if you will. Well, it turns out that there's a lot of stories. If 10 teams on an Agile release train are planning every 2 weeks, they've got maybe 100 stories in their backlog. There's 1,000 stories in the backlog. How does the product manager deal with that? They can't. And they don't say things like, they don't go to the automobile dealer and say, I want a car where there's a little button on the side of the door that when I hold my finger on the button, the window will go up as long as I hold my finger on the button. But when I take my finger off the button, the window either stays in place or doesn't. I want power windows, right? So enabling product management to talk about features and benefits, which they already know how to do, and not talking them in and saying, hey, you have to talk differently to me now because we don't get the features and benefits things. Everything's a user story. That just didn't, frankly, scale and, frankly, didn't make any sense. So user stories invented by Agilists, features, collections of user stories make sense. At the portfolio level, you go right to the top and you talk about epics, which are just big cross-cutting initiatives. And then when we introduce the value stream, we introduce the word capabilities, because in building big systems, I could have 500 or 600 features in flight for any 90-day period. Well, I can't keep track of that either. But the question is, do I have my new radar capability? Have I doubled the precision of controlling the rate of infusion from the infusion pump? Those are the larger scale capabilities. Those are the labeling claims, if you will, for big systems. So there's epics, capabilities, features, and stories. Some people would look at that as deep. Other people, I can name a couple companies that would say that's not deep enough. We have a 7-tiered hierarchy. We originally have 3. We're at 4. I don't see that expanding. I don't see any reason for that to expand for now.
Great. So, Dean, what do you advise to organizations who are interested in adopting Scaled Agile framework? So, what should they care about most?
What they should care about is whether they have the knowledge to properly implement a framework that's significant, whether they have the ability to do the organizational change management. And we always start with leadership training. I'll tell you our true story of how I got started down this path with Scale. My first big scaled rollout was at BMC. That was a success. I then joined another really big Scrum rollout that affected about 4,000 people. That was essentially not a success. Now, were the teams better? Yeah. Did we save the company? No. Could you say that Agile saved them? No. And in so doing, when we did a retrospective of that, we discovered that we did what all of us used to do: train the teams, leave the managers out of the room. And even in the day, that was the time of the chicken and pig story, right? Which is, yeah, I'm a leader. You can come to the daily stand-up, but you can't say anything. So we took our leaders and we moved them out of the room, and we trained their practitioners to do a way of working that the leaders didn't understand. Think about that for a second. How does that scale? The managers don't know the new working model. How does that scale? How effective is that going to be? Well, it's hindsight to come to the conclusion that that's like also really stupid. So then we had another opportunity in the same company to approach it differently, and they said we were reluctant, frankly, to do it. And the reason was we were worried about, another year's worth of failure. And we set an ask. We said, if we'll do this transformation, we want to lead it. We know how badly you need it. It was obvious from their business context. It was a save the company deal, and it did save the company. But we're going to train the leaders first. And we said we need 2 days. And what do you think their reaction was?
I don't
What's
know.
their first reaction? We can't do that. We don't have any time. And we said, if your leaders don't have any time to learn a new way of working, it's not going to work. So we're not going to do it. And they said begrudgingly, okay. And, I'm sure there's a couple of choice words thrown in there. You got to do it, but it's got to be done fast. So in 90 days, we spent, probably close to 8 weeks building what became the heart of Leading Safe, our leadership training class, one that you guys have been in. We spent much of the summer building that, and then we entered the fall rollout, and we trained 160 managers around the world. We went to every region and got the managers, and the last 2 classes we did, we had people that had missed the training in all the other regions fly in. Every single executive and manager in that class took the equivalent of the 2-day Leading Safe class. That was the fastest and most successful rollout I have yet witnessed. Incredibly successful. And the difference was the leaders led. Because we can't count on folks like you guys to go in and make that organizational change. You can't do that, right? We're outside agents. We have good advice. We're consultants. We see a lot of things. I can't change my customer. I can only coach him. Deming, the most famous systems thinker of all, basically came to the conclusion after 30 years in the field that these people in these manufacturing plants, they're already doing their best. They're doing everything they can, but the result is still crap. But it's not crap people. It's crappy systems. So only management can change the system. So what do we worry about with SAFE? Do we have the opportunity to turn management into lean agile leaders? Lean actually has a term for this. I don't use it because it's just too long, but it's really pithy. It's called every manager is a lean thinking lean thinking manager teacher. Well, what does that say? They're a lean thinker, they manage that way, and they teach others the principles and practices. If you can do that in your enterprise, you will succeed. And we have extraordinary success whenever we have the opportunity to train leadership first. And we have lesser success when they say, we don't really need that, we get that, we're pretty lean guys, we're fast on our feet, we're really agile, we totally get it. You guys go be even more agile and you'll have my support. But then that support comes back and says, well, the software development lifecycle guidance doesn't work anymore. Well, we can't change that. That's been here since, 1873. So they're leading with words and not deeds, and they're leading with instinct and not wisdom. So when they pick up the wisdom and the knowledge, they're going, holy cow, what are we doing with our software development lifecycle? We're way out here in the cone of uncertainty, and we're freezing the requirements. That's really bizarre. How is that going to work? How could we possibly know 1 year before we ship the system exactly what the requirements of the system are? I mean, as we build the system, it's going to create its own new requirements. That's the leadership we need. That doesn't mean we don't figure out what we're trying to build. It means that a lot is intentful and a lot is emergent. That's the key. The success is leadership. The problem of organizational change management can only be done by leadership. We don't treat them as chickens. We treat them as, think about this for a second. An engineering manager is probably a developer who decided to take a career path to manage other developers. That takes courage. I wouldn't want to manage me, or probably you guys, right?
Yeah.
So we start with some respect for the fact that they're people like us that have a different set of responsibilities, and they live in this tough world between where the world really happens and the governance and the corporate structure. We need those people. They're our peeps. They're us. And when they know what to do, they'll do it. And they're just as motivated and just as insightful and just as smart as all the people on the development team. So start with respect, augment that with training, and let the leaders do their job.
Great. Sad to say, but we are nearing the end of our conversation. Lastly, we know that SAFe is at version 4 right now.
Yes.
For those who are already familiar with SAFe, what are the differences between the current and prior version?
So version 4 is a really big change because we went through the SAFe for Lean Systems Engineering branch, and we worked with some of the largest systems builders for a year, having them help us define what it meant to build a big system in a lean manner. We talk about cross-functional teams. We talk about developers and testers. Well, they would argue that's not cross-functional, that's all software, right? They talk about, merging optics and firmware and ASIC design. That's cross-functional. So those lessons learned went into SAFe for Lean Systems Engineering, and that built the layer in the middle. So 80% of the work for 4.0 is that layer in the middle. The emergence of Kanban as a first-class citizen, a higher degree of awareness and acceptance in the industry, that created a thread all the way through. So now we have top-to-bottom kind of content flow. You can see that. The foundations layer, Lean Agile Leadership, communities of practice, we didn't have a place to talk about that before. The Lean Agile mindset, the principles are all now part of the big picture. They're in the shadow, and that means that they're there to support you, but you can no longer print a big picture without having a discussion about SAFe principles.
Thank you very much, Dean. I guess we run out of our time. Thank you very much for your time being with us. It was really a pleasure for us to have you at our Agile Leaders show. I hope in the future we would like to host you personally in Turkey as well. So if you can spare some time at your calendar at some time, we will be very appreciated.
Very good. Well, I'm not opposed. I like the food.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for having me. It's my honor to be able to talk to your Turkish audience.
You are welcome.
Good, thanks.
This was the Agile Leaders episode 14. See you on the next episode. Thank you very much for watching.
Goodbye.